Every time I make a project with a non-rectangular cabinet, I get a bunch of questions about it. And as you can see here, I make a lot of projects with non-rectangular cabinets. Anyway, and while this is something that we've certainly addressed a few times in different videos, it occurred to me while we were making our last set of plans for this guy, the Little Larry coffee table, who's based on a non-rectangular cabinet, that it might be good to have one sort of definitive video, this video, where we cover everything from top to bottom to show people that it really is pretty simple and it's not something that needs to be intimidating. So here's what we'll cover in this video. Everything you'll need to make these kinds of boxes or cabinets. Specifically how I go about this, though I'm sure there's plenty of other ways to do it. Why it's actually simpler to build something like a trapezoid compared to a rectangular box. A simple way to make clamping blocks that are custom fit to whatever angle you build. And why it's also arguably easier to fit drawer boxes in a trapezoidal cabinet. Okay, let's get into it. So all you're going to need to do this is a table saw, this simple jig that I'll show you how to build, and a calculator, which I won't show you how to build. And actually, I don't even have one. Hey, Sean, can I borrow your calculator?
Well, you can borrow my phone.
Thanks. All that said, don't worry because the math is really easy. As long as you know how to add, subtract, and divide by 2, you'll be good to go. So on second thought, we probably don't even need the calculator. All right, let's start off with the jig since that's kind of the cornerstone of this technique. Now, I'm not going to give a whole lot of dimensions because really the only thing that matters is that it fits your table saw fence. And since our saws might be different, dimensions wouldn't really work. That said, I'm going to start off with a piece of 3/4 inch plywood that's about 22 inches long and 30 inches wide. Next, I'm going to rip 2 strips so that they're basically flush with the top of the fence. Then we can clamp the first 2 pieces back onto the fence and use some screws or glue-in screws to attach these 3 pieces together. And when you attach the top piece, make sure that it's flush on the saw side and that any little bit of overhang is on the opposite side. Also, this is optional, but I'm going to attach a knob as well. Finally, we'll attach the remaining piece of plywood to the cradle that we just made using glue and screws and some clamps. And I'm going to use a square here to make sure that it's at 90 degrees, which it should be. But if not, you can put some little shims in there to get it nice. Okay, we've got our jig and now we're ready to start making our box. So all of these theories will apply regardless of what angle you want on your box, but to keep it simple, we're going to make a box that's a nice whole number. So we'll say 20 degrees off of 90. So that means these 2 angles are going to be 20 less than 90 and these 2 are going to be 20 more than 90. That's the adding and subtracting I was talking about. And in terms of the division, since we're cutting bevels to make our miter boxes, we just need to know 70 divided by 2 and 110 divided by 2. So that'd be 35 and 55. So at this point, we've got all the math worked out. But before I tilt my blade, I'm going to want to cut what's going to become the top panel to roughly the finished length that we're going to want it. So I'm going to cut this piece to 12 inches, but this would work for any size. And the reason that we're doing this now is because when we cut the bevels on our 4 exterior panels, we're not going to have any control over dialing in a specific length on the top panel. So we need to do it now. On our other 3 pieces though, we can leave those long and all of our panels can be wide as well at this point. Okay, so we had worked out all the math and that told us that we wanted our blade set to 35 degrees. So that's what we've got right now. But I want to illustrate the sort of advantages of this method and what about it arguably makes it easier than making a regular rectangular or square box. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and give the handle 2 full turns so that my blade's going to be set at some arbitrary angle that I don't even know, and I don't even care that I don't know it. So let's do it. 1, 2. Is that 2 or 3? I don't know. Whatever. Doesn't matter. I'm locking it down. And let's see how it goes. Okay, so here we're putting the jig that we made on our fence, and we're going to start off with our top panel piece. So we're going to lock our fence in position and make a cut. Then we're going to flip it over and make a cut on the other end. And that's it. Now we can set the top aside. Next, we're going to take one of our side panel pieces and cut it the exact same way. Then we're going to set it aside and get our other side panel and again make the same cut. So on these panels, I'm only cutting one end this way. And at this point, we're done with our jig, so we can put it away, and now we're going to set our fence to whatever distance we want for our side panels and cut each of those. And this is really the key part, is that we're going to do this without changing the blade angle. So at this point, we've got our top and two sides done, and we just need to make the bottom. And this is probably the most intimidating, or at least confusing part of the process, because people always want to know how they figure out how long this panel should be. And you could use trigonometry to do that, but you shouldn't. And the reason you shouldn't is because even if you know how to figure out that math, it's going to assume that everything that you've done up to this point is perfect, which I don't care how good you are, it probably isn't. And in my particular case, since I don't even know what these angles are, I couldn't use math. So to that end, what I do is dry fit my three pieces together, take a measurement, and then sneak up on getting the perfect fit with my bottom panel. And to do this, it usually takes me about 5 minutes of going back and forth, so really I don't see any point in trying to get any fancier than this. Okay, now before we assemble, let's talk about why this is actually easier to get perfect than a rectangular box. So if you want a rectangle, there's only one way to get it perfect, and that is by setting your blade to a perfect 45 degrees, which is often easier said than done. And there are some tips and tricks that you can use for building better boxes that are squares or rectangles. In fact, we have a whole video about that, so I'll link that in the description. But all of that aside, if you're off at all, you're going to end up with a box that's out of square and or has gaps in the joints. But with the approach that we used on the trapezoidal box, your gaps are always going to be perfect thanks to complementary angles. And that's why I was able to set my angle randomly a few minutes back, and my box is still going to come out fine. Basically because I cut half of my joints vertically and the other half horizontally, they're complementing one another. So any of the 4 cuts is going to add up to 180 degrees. And since the entire case is comprised of 8 cuts, those are going to add up to 360 degrees. So let's just call whatever angle I had set my blade to, the unknown angle, X. Well, because I never changed that angle, that means that these joints were 90 minus X, and these joints were 90 plus X. So 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus X minus X equals 360 degrees. It doesn't matter what X equals, you still end up with 360. On the other hand, if you were to set your blade to 44.9 and cut all of your pieces this way, the normal way, you'll end up with a total of 44.9 times 8, which equals 359.2, or almost 1 degree of error, which will make it impossible to have a gapless square box. So if that all sounded confusing, don't worry, because really the only thing that you need to know, and in fact you don't even really need to know it, you just need to believe it, is that the complementary angles that you created by cutting half of your pieces horizontally and half of your pieces vertically offset any human error that you had when setting your blade, and that results in perfect bevels every time. Okay. Now, if I put this thing together and end up with a huge gap, I'm going to look like an idiot, so let's put it together and make sure that we're good. So to do that, the last cuts that we would want to make are on our panel pieces by ripping them to whatever the finished width is going to be. And to do that, you'd want to tilt your blade back up to 90 degrees. But before we touch anything, and remember, we still don't know what this angle is, let's make some clamping blocks that are customized for putting this box together. Now, normally when people do this, at least when I used to, you start thinking about math and offsetting things, yada, yada, yada. But when you boil it all down, it's actually really simple. So all you have to do, in this case, is nothing. Don't change your blade angle. So let me prove that to you by cutting my clamping blocks, and then we'll talk about why this works. So here I've got a few pieces of scrap wood that I had cut to about 1.5 by 1.5 inches square before we got started, and these are all as long as my box is deep. And I'm going to need 1 piece for each corner, so I have 4 total. So all I'm going to do is set my fence so that I'm ripping these in half. And by doing that, I've created 2 wedges with a 90-degree corner and then 2 corners with unknown angles, but that we know are complementary, as in they add up to 90 degrees. But more importantly, they're the exact same unknown angles that we had cut on our case pieces. So if you look at this drawing here, where you can see the 2 different clamping blocks that we'll need in order to assemble our case, you can see that by the colored dots that these are the same strip, only flipped around in a different orientation in order to end up with faces that we can clamp to that are parallel with the miter joint face. So what I'll do is get my box panels loosely in place, and then I can figure out my proper orientations, and I'm going to make some marks to help myself keep track of the orientation, and then I can glue them onto some strips of plywood. Just for fun, now that we're done using the blade tilted, let's see what it was at. $31.2 degrees. Yeah, that would have been fun math to figure out. And I don't know why you would want a box like that, but whatever. 31.2. Okay, now we can put our blade back up to 90 degrees, rip our panels to their finished widths, and then put this thing together. Then I want to share some of my other thoughts and tips and probably answer a few questions that you might be formulating right now. But while we're putting that together, let's take a second to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. So I've been using Squarespace for over 4 years now, and it's been great. Prior to that, I used to code everything on my own, which is fine if you like doing that. But it's hard, it takes time, and honestly, the outcome wasn't as nice as the templates that I use now with Squarespace. And the worst part is, it was taking me away from doing things that I really should be focusing on, like making weird boxes. Now, in addition to Squarespace making it super easy to build and maintain your site, buy domains, and all that stuff, they also have plenty of e-commerce tools, which has been really helpful since we started selling our plans. Things like inventory management, a simple and secure checkout process, and unlimited products allows us to easily manage online transactions. So if you're thinking about starting a website, or even if you already have one that you think could be better, you owe it to yourself to check out Squarespace to see if it might be a better fit for you. Just head over to squarespace.com/4eyes for a free trial. Then when you're ready to launch, use the offer code 4eyes to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. All right, thanks Squarespace. All right, so things are looking good, and hopefully I've convinced you that this technique is pretty foolproof. So you might be thinking, okay, why not just cut rectangular boxes this way too? Just set the blade to 45 and all of the same concepts would apply. And you actually could do that, but I wouldn't, and here's why. So let's take that example of accidentally setting your blade to 44.9 degrees again. You remember that this was going to result in there being a gap in your miters. And while that's true, what most people are more likely to do is spread that air over all 4 miters rather than leaving it for the last miter. So we're talking about a little tiny sliver of a gap in this situation. And actually, that's why in the boxes video, again, link in the description, we talk about setting our blade to err on the side of the gaps being on the inside of the miter rather than the outside, like we have in this drawing. So again, if these are concepts that you feel like you could use help on, definitely check out that video. There's a lot of other good information as well. But anyway, even with those gaps, we should still be able to get 90-degree corners. On the other hand, if you use the trapezoid technique to try to make a rectangular box and your blade is off at all, you're going to end up with tight miters, but with a box that's ever so slightly a trapezoid. Probably not enough that you'd be able to visibly see it, but if then you go to inset drawers or doors, you're going to start to notice uneven gaps. And I guess the bottom line is, yeah, you could use this method for rectangles, but I just wouldn't. Now, this kind of naturally brings us to the next topic, which is drawers. So in the past, whenever I made trapezoidal boxes with drawers in them, like for example on this piece, I would inset a false partition all the way towards one end so that I'd have 2 parallel faces to use whatever drawer slide hardware I wanted. So at this point, you basically just have a rectangular cabinet. Another alternative to doing this, which Sean did when he built this desk, was putting these little spacer blocks on the trapezoidal side, again, giving him 2 parallel faces for hardware slides. So I guess the takeaway here is that if you want to use off-the-shelf hardware, using either of these 2 methods is going to make installing drawer boxes in an angled or a rectangular box essentially the same. But if you want to make your own drawer wood slides, like we did with the Little Larry coffee table, it's arguably easier to do it in an angled cabinet. So here's why. So with a rectangular box, if you were making slides like this, you'd have one shot to perfectly size the thickness of your slides. Otherwise, they're just going to get too tight or too loose. But with a box like this, as long as you're in the right ballpark with the thickness of the slides, you can get a perfect side-to-side adjustment by slightly altering the height of the box. Think of it kind of like wedging it in until it's exactly as tight as you want it to be. Alright, so if this is a technique that you've ever wanted to try, or if you have any projects in mind that use weird angles, I hope this video gives you a bit of confidence. And if you enjoyed this video, or maybe you're just looking for content that dives deeper into the world of woodworking and making furniture, I highly recommend checking out our plans. They're all online, and actually, let me just show you. Hey Sean, can I borrow your laptop? Thanks. And actually, what am I even doing? I'll just edit in a clip. So if you haven't seen them, we've got a pretty good catalog of pieces on our website, and we're always adding more. And I really think that they're a great learning tool because at the core of each set of plans are highly detailed step-by-step video instructions where we break everything down into chapters to make sure that it's easy to follow and understand so that you'll come away with a great piece of furniture. And then to supplement those videos, you'll also get a PDF with more information and detailed dimensional drawings, and we provide these in both metric and imperial. Plus, for some of the pieces where we use templates, you'll get SVG and PDF files that you can use to make your own templates. Or if you prefer, we also offer pre-made MDF templates that you can buy and we'll mail to you. Oh, and you also get stickers. You get the rocking chair, Savato dresser, the spider coffee table, the dining chair, Desquire, that's a fan favorite, Little Larry coffee table, and the Glen lounge chair. He even comes with his own little ottoman. How cute. So if you're interested, but you want to find out more, we actually uploaded an example chapter of what our plans look like. So I'll put a link to that in the description. So check them out. And then if you still want more information, it's all there on the website. We work really hard on these things, and I really think that you'll enjoy them. Oh, and also, if you join my Patreon at the $10 level, you can get a field notes booklet and a t-shirt, and you'll also get a code for $15 off of our plans. So I'll put a link to that too. All right. Well, sorry for getting a little salesy there at the end, but I hope that you did enjoy this video, and we'll see you in the next one.